Oh, yeah. I told you. You like that, Maya?
Right, yeah.
I think I'll do the show like this.
Good morning, Timothy, and good morning to everybody watching us on May 31st. This is the 277th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Esquire, which is a government relations agency here in Tokyo, and me as a host, Maya Matsuoka. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and you too, Timothy. It's a pleasure to
Thank you,
have you
Maya.
with us, of course, because without you, this show is never going to take place. And right, so congratulations, Timothy, on the Bloomberg mention. So it is really nice to have people watching and also to be relying on these briefings as well. So also congratulations on publishing the drones article, the first installment on policy drones here in Japan. So there was a lot of interest in it, and I'm very much looking forward to the next installment actually. So yeah, I would love to know when it comes out, and of course whether you're planning to, or what you're planning to include in it, of course. But before that, today we are here to talk about politics in Japan, and so I am looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Thank you very much, Maya. Today is May 31st. Maya, almost we've made it through another month. Can you believe that?
Oh
Tomorrow
yeah.
is June. Wow. Gosh, time
Wow,
flies.
indeed.
So it's been a really nice weekend. It hasn't rained here. I'm on the Chiba coast as almost always. I'm either in some far off port or I'm here in my home port. There is a typhoon that's approaching, but it's expected to curl up the coast, hit Kanto probably around Wednesday, maybe Thursday. And so the weather should be nice next weekend. But now we're moving into June, and this is really the summertime. This is when people are going to the beaches and the beach. What do they call the beach houses, where
I guess,
you can get
yes.
some. Yeah, those are starting to sprout out. They're under regulation, so they can't be built until a certain date. But we're approaching that date, and it's Japan once again changes. But we're in the middle of a lot of change. In fact, Maya, I know you feel it too because you follow it as much as I do. But there's just a tremendous amount happening simultaneously, and the feeling is one of compression. We talk about that all the time. Things. It's not like, gosh, I live in Japan and nothing ever happens here and everything is all controlled by these guys in loud suits and they get on TV and they're so old and they never say something interesting. Diplomacy, economic pressures, security concerns, fiscal realities, and domestic political posturing are colliding inside a very narrow window. We experience it certainly weekly, but sometimes even daily. This forces decisions that would not normally be made, and we can expose and we can discuss this now. So this morning, I want to walk everybody through several converging threads. The Marcos state visit, which was huge, 3 days state visit, a formal state visit. Japan's evolving regional architecture, the domestic political maneuvering that's going on, the yen and the bond market pressure. The Bank of Japan did tell us how much money they spent on intervention this over Golden Week, defense developments, including North Korea, the immigration reform, which is really starting to upset a lot of people. They made some legal, some legislative progress this week, and the pronouncements came out. And then there's this quiet but potentially transformative shift happening, just beneath the surface. And if you're not watching things, they can escape your attention, but we're here to give it to you all the time. If you have any questions or comments, please pass them on to Maya. We'll address them towards the end in the Q&A, but please give me about 30 minutes of your time, and I'll try and walk us through this so that you're better informed and you know more about what's going on in this world than you did before this briefing. Thank you very much, Maya, for creating this opportunity and for creating this podcast 277 times consecutively. That's pretty remarkable.
Can you believe that you were here 277 weeks in a row?
I
That's
can't.
something.
No.
I know.
And
Okay, but
as I talk as I talk to other people, I meet people as I walk in the diet and I do other things. People recognize me and they say, "Hi, Mr. Langley, we watch your show." And 200, that's over 5 years. And we've had certain episodes where I was reporting from a very strange atmosphere or inside my car when it was raining or inside the boat or something like that. But we've had a really a span of tremendous experiences. But we have a core audience that really is stuck with us, and it really encourages us to go further. So your everyone's questions and comments, their congratulations, and just posting, like or sharing, just really encourages us. So thank you very much for that.
thank you indeed. And again, if you are watching us now or later, again, as Timothy said, leave your comments here and also questions so that we can include them in the Q&A afterwards, after the briefing is over. And then also, please share these briefings with your friends and family members, with colleagues, bosses, and also subordinates as well, if you think that they are informative and they can help people get understanding of the Japanese business environment and Japanese politics, of course. So it's always a pleasure to be with you. And today I will once again turn it over to you, Timothy, so that you go over or through the topics that you mentioned earlier, and from there we can go into the Q&A part of the briefing.
Great. Thank you very much,
Timothy?
Maya. One of the things that doesn't escape much notice, President Trump was elected, America first, beginning to bring things more central to America and letting the allies, fend for themselves. This regional architecture that needs to happen as a consequence of that has been moving at a breakneck speed. The prime minister visited South Korea 2 weeks ago. She visited the hometown of the President Lee there. And this week, she hosted the prime minister or the president of the Philippines, Bongbong Marcos. This is a formal state visit. So there are lots of people who come in on a visit, but a formal state visit, you pull out all the stoppers. There's a formal state dinner. There's a meeting with the prime minister, or I'm sorry, with the emperor. There's even an address to both houses of the parliament. And so this last one carried real significance. Many people forget or maybe discount the relationship between Japan and the Philippines, and it's had its own ups and downs, but it's really, really coming to the fore. They've actually signed a formal elevated tie, making a comprehensive strategic partnership. Not quite allies. It's one of the steps to becoming actually a registered ally. But this is a first with the Southeast Asian nation. The key outcomes of the agreements were advanced transfer of Abu Kama state class destroyers and TC-90 aircraft. This has happened in the past. A lot of Coast Guard ships were donated by the Japanese government to the Philippines, aircraft on loan. But this is a big one. TC-90 aircraft launch. They also launched working groups on defense equipment and defense cooperation. So that means, using and utilizing the same kind of equipment and strengthening maritime security coordination. Marcos also received, this is important, the highest honor, the Grand Cordon of the Supreme Order of the Chrysanthemum. That was an award by the emperor. So when you have a sash, that's what you wear. That's what everybody wears when you get one of these huge recognitions, and that's the highest order. So that's a big deal. This move with the Philippines is part of a more broad and a deliberate Japanese strategy, strengthening practical security and economic ties with key maritime partners. Just not the Philippines, Australia, the Philippines, Vietnam. Her first visit was with Vietnam, as you might recall, and it's designed to be a hedge and an insurance policy in this increasingly contested area involving Taiwan and the Straits here. So the earlier she visited Korea, and there's kind of an afterglow with that. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since she was there, but the resonance of that meeting is beginning to show a little bit of of fruits. The discussions focused heavily on energy security and LNG coordination, the North Korea policy, obviously, and broader regional stability. And both sides agreed to explore mutual supply arrangements on crude oil, petroleum products, LNG, in case of disruptions, what both the countries are kind of equally facing right now. But it's a pragmatic alignment, and it matters because both countries face similar pressures regarding Taiwan contingencies, shipping insecurity, and questions about the future of U.S. forces. What, how dependable is President Trump and this relationship they have with the United States? So a lot of people are concerned about that, and the speed with which Japan and Korea coordination has deepened is one of the more underappreciated shifts, I think, in Northeast Asia right now. They have a 2+2. They have the shuttle diplomacy. He goes to Japan, she goes to Korea. They do this back and forth. So it's probably not on a month-by-month basis, but in coordination with 2+2, it's at least quarterly. And we'll wait and see what the design is for the next visit by President Lee to Japan. Domestic politics has really undergone a lot of challenges this last week. Inside Nagatacho, the political temperature remains elevated, but relatively controlled. You're not reading a whole lot in the press about the inside fights. There are some things going on. The LDP continues to consolidate power around Takaichi, but old gravitational forces, they begin to quietly, assert themselves. It's kind of unavoidable. The disappearance of factions, that absence, it's a vacuum in it. It pulls in other energy. So it's not dead, but they're just it's just not factional politics at this point in time. And of remarkable note is with Ishin and Kokumin, they're engaged in delicate negotiations with the LDP. Ishin, on the one hand, is pushing hard for a reduction of the 45 lower house seats in the Diet, 10%. The LDP has basically agreed to that. Whether they come from the various regional representatives or from the list is yet to be completely decided. What was decided is that Osaka will become the alternative capital of Tokyo, or the alternative to Tokyo, in the event of some catastrophic incident. And so there is some progress there. On the other side, you've got the Democratic Party for the People, Kokumin, under the leadership of Mr. Tamaki Yuichiro. And he is really playing hard to get, knowing that the LDP needs his upper house votes. Even with Ishin, they still lack 4 seats in the upper house to pass legislation. And so they're having a hell of a time. They can pass things through in the lower house. They kick it upstairs to the upper house. And that's where things begin to get snarly. And then concessions need to be given. And it's just an intense dance that goes on. And we expect more and more of this, this dancing to continue in the next couple of weeks, because legislation needs to be passed. And the legislation agenda is moving very quickly because there's been some great movement this last week. But before I get to that, sticking to the factions and the opposition parties, Ishin, that sort of thing, San Seito, you remember San Seito shot out of the barrel really big in the last election, won 15 seats, and became a powerhouse because they were nothing. They were maybe 3 Diet members, and then after the election they were 15, and everybody focused on what was their story, what was their message. Well, it's basically, we don't like foreigners, get the foreigners out. And the leader of San Seito was very prolific in criticizing foreigners coming in. They don't pay their taxes, they escape, they don't pay for their the health insurance and that sort of thing. And what came out this last week is that of his 15 lower house members, 8 of them were revealed to have used loopholes to reduce their national health insurance payments. So they're guilty of exactly the thing that San Seito was criticizing these snarly foreigners, particularly for some reason Filipinas, that they come in, they work, they don't pay their Social Security, their health insurance, and then they go back, and that really is an issue with him. And it turns out that the same party that's been loudly criticizing Filipinos, or actually foreigners in general, and getting a lot of bandwidth as a consequence of that, is now facing penalties and accusations for this hypocrisy, and it's just not a good look. But the diet conversations, this issue was raised, and it continues to generate significant public backlash. And it's just one of those things. Be careful what you criticize. Be careful of what targets you aim for, because payback is a bitch. But getting on to the legislation of this last week, and like I said, it's been very active. The Diet passed several notable bills this week, and it gives you a kind of a window into the priorities that are moving forward. So they pass legislation, they have discussions about it, they try and address an issue, they pass legislation, and then usually the legislation goes into effect almost never immediately, but in a short window of time, maybe 6 months, and then more likely in the next fiscal year, because they've got to allocate budget for the legislation they've made, and they also need to give the bureaucrats time to fix the regulations that are hinged on the legislation, because the legislation is primary, but you can't do anything without the implementation, and that's what the bureaucrats do. But first and foremost, there's a cabinet-level intelligence bureau that was created. The legislation established a more centralized intelligence coordination body under the Prime Minister's office. It reminds me a lot of the digital agency and what that was designed to do. That was designed to unify the structure, the internet structure, the digital structure of all of the various ministries, and coalesce them into one ministry, which is under the Prime Minister. That's what they're doing with the Intelligence Bureau, but it's really robust, and it's a significant step towards becoming a normal nation. That's what the Prime Minister and many of the ministers of state are saying. It's moving away from this traditional fragmentation, like with the digital agency, across ministries towards better integration and faster decision making on security threats. But I think we're seeing a trend here that more and more is being kind of allocated to the Prime Minister's office. It is a parliamentary democracy. It's not a presidency, so the power is usually more dispersed, but I think you can see that there's a lot of movement here to kind of consolidate that under the Prime Minister. This is a long road that's been going on. It began earlier with taking the massive power from the bureaucracies and inserting it, first of all, into members of the parliament, and then later into the cabinet, into the Conte. But that's a time for a different story. But they also talked about the supplemental budget. That I think there is basically agreement that there's going to be a supplemental budget. The ruling and opposition parties both agreed to a tentative schedule for passing the supplemental budget. So this is critical given the pressures on inflation, energy costs, and potential Hormuz-related economic fallout. So the next discussions over the next week or so, and I think it'll be fast. I think they're going to pass some sort of supplemental budget this week, this coming week. And the negotiations, it's just a tightrope for the government, because they want to address the economic issues, but Ms. Takechi also needs to project, fiscal responsibility and discipline. So those two don't quite mesh, and so it's a delicate dance for her. Moving on, Maya mentioned that I was quoted in Bloomberg this week on the yen. Excuse me. The yen looked like it was scratching the 160, and I think that's what triggered it. Somebody from Bloomberg, who is, I think, a member of the audience and at least goes through the synopsis, called for a comment on the yen approaching or eclipsing 160. It didn't quite. Today it closed on Friday at 159.39. This time last week it was 159, maybe 60 or so. So it was really scratching up there, and I thought maybe it would broach it. But there seems to be a real allergy to letting it go beyond 60. Something is apparently in the chemistry that once it once it goes beyond 160, all sorts of things just happen. But this stands out dramatically. What stands out dramatically is the scale of Japan's intervention during and after a Golden Week. So the Bank of Japan has a monthly meeting towards the end of the month, 2 days, where they're supposed to reveal what they did this last month. And they were required to talk about how much they spent on the intervention. It was a staggering 11.7 trillion yen. That's equivalent to about 73 or 74 billion dollars in yen buying operations. That, to put that number in perspective, that's larger than Japan's entire national defense budget for 1 year. It is roughly equivalent to building maybe 10 or 12 state-of-the-art hospitals across the country, or maybe funding the Tokyo Olympics twice over. That's how big that number is. And this is one of the largest concentrated interventions in decades. The goal was to slow speculative momentum and defending the psychologically critical 160 line. So they did that, but we're just a month away from Golden Week, and we're still scratching the 160 area. So the intervention bought a little bit of time, but it didn't really solve the underlying pressure. And so we can anticipate other movement coming, and the yen is not going to it's not going to strengthen. I mean, we don't see any indicia that it's going to strengthen significantly. So the bond yields also keep creeping higher, and for countries like Japan, which has been long accustomed to zero or near zero borrowing, this shift is forcing really difficult prioritization conversations that Japan has been able to avoid in the past. So with money now being a little bit more expensive to borrow, Japan can't be so willy-nilly and I wouldn't say lackadaisical, but they've had a bit of a freedom on that, and that's no longer the case. Moving on to defense and security, because of the legislation that was passed, North Korea has been particularly active with missile tests over the last 2 weeks. The funny thing is that you don't hear about that. You don't see that in the press. I had to actually dig. I was suspicious that it was going on, but it's not really being discussed, and I think it's probably a concern and a worry. With regard to press freedom and having access to that, Japan ranks number 50 in the global market of press freedom. So although you might think NHK and the press is doing a great job here, it's there are 50 other countries that do far better than Japan in terms of press. So the fact that we don't hear about North Korea, those missile tests, the submarine tests, missile firings from submarines is very worrying. And I think Japan has enough to concern itself with, but I think it's important to point these things out. But it's unmistakable that Japan continues to move more and more steadily towards greater normalization. Discussions around unmanned systems like drones on the sea, drones in the air, drones underwater, and also maritime domain awareness and cooperation with partners like the Philippines is gaining real momentum. Those are the three keys in discussions with the Philippines: drones, situational awareness on the maritime domain, and cooperation with defense-related assets. And that's a pretty big deal. I mean, the Philippines that's between the Philippines and Japan, that's a large body of water that the two countries feel a need to protect in the event that something happens. And what's going on in Hormuz, some people have said it's just practice for what's going to happen in the Malacca Straits or in our region of the world. The other thing that's come up this week that is really interesting, Maya, is immigration reform. This is one of the most consequential and controversial developments in this last week. The Immigration Control Act passed just on Friday, actually, and it has rules that significantly raise the fee ceilings for certain visas. So for permanent residency, that's now 300,000 yen. It used to be, I forget what it used to be, but it's just an application process. You get a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5-year extension, and now that's a 300,000 yen per application. So people will pay that, but it's, some people have other choices, and for that kind of increase, it makes you wonder what the Japanese government is thinking about and why they're doing that. More significantly is the visa requirements for business visas. Now it is required that you pay 5 million yen plus the mandatory employment of at least one full-time Japanese national. So that's just going to kick the air out of a lot of companies that are here. There are a lot of companies, they're one-man shops, maybe two-man shops, mom and pop shop of people who've set up a KK, and now they're supposed to cough up 5 million in capital investment, and they're supposed to employ a Japanese. That's kind of counterintuitive because the population is declining. Even established Japanese companies can't find the right number of people to man operations. And you walk into any convenience store now, and they're all manned, at least in Tokyo, by non-Japanese. And so the visa requirement will hit them because they need visas. That means their companies will be paying for that. But also the business visas, I think, is going to be particularly impactful. So there are a lot of reasons for this, weeding out the countries that Japan is not very favorable to, but it's like addressing an issue with a sledgehammer to address one particular issue. But I think there might be something a little bit deeper going on here. And the tourism will continue. People love to visit Japan. It's cheap, it's inexpensive comparatively. And so you see a different kind of class of foreigners visiting Japan that normally wouldn't, because Japan has always been seen as expensive, but now it's not. And so you're getting a lot of foreign tourists that wouldn't think of, international travel. But since the yen is so weak, it looks like a real bargain. And this shift really seems to be aimed at certain nationalities, but it's a blanket application. So everybody is going to suffer from that. And I just don't know what the future holds for foreigners coming in. If you have a policy like this, people will read into that. People who are studying or preparing for their careers and they're considering options, they might think, Japan is cool, and I'd love to go there and learn Japanese and maybe practice martial arts while I pursue a career. They're now thinking that, and other countries will benefit from that energy. So it's really kind of a funny situation. It is passed, it will go into effect, and it will have an impact. So I'll continue to watch that. But it is in social media, it's getting a lot of attention. There's a lot of criticism there. Before I wrap up, I would like to reminisce just a little bit about this particular period of time in Japanese history, the end of May. It's very important throughout the year, but to bring it into focus, there are two things that happened during this period of time. The contrast just couldn't be greater, and I just want to talk about it. And I don't mean to dwell much on the Pacific War, but the Pacific War was such a big deal, and it really formed the foundation of what Japan has become now. And the remarkable thing is that as much of the animosity and the hatred existed between these two countries, look at us today. But it's worth remembering that one of the most harrowing chapters of Japanese history was the firebombing that occurred during Tokyo during the spring of 1945. So Maya, you took a walk around Yamanote yesterday, and that area that you walked on was one of the targets for the firebombing. So there were basically 3 firebombings that occurred. The first one was in 1942. That was with Colonel Jimmy Doolittle. They had these bombers, these B-25s, that took off from aircraft carriers. That had never been done before. And so they stripped these B-25s down to basic equipment, and they filled them with small napalm bombs. 16 of them took off from the aircraft carrier, the Hornet. And the 16, they had enough fuel for a one-way trip. All 16 of these aircraft crashed or fell into the sea. Maybe 8 or 10 of the pilots were captured by the Japanese, but the rest kind of parachuted out or made it out into China. and then the retribution of the Japanese forces for the Chinese who harbored or helped or didn't reveal more information about these pilots and these airmen was really horrific. That was in 1942 in late March. Then at this time there were two bombing runs that occurred. 465 Stratoforces, big bombers, bombed Tokyo, Yamanote area, Shimbashi, Shibuya, Meguro, and they just estimated, 3,500 civilians were killed, almost 200,000 buildings were damaged. This was towards the end of the war in late May, and this is just one of the catastrophes of war that happened. And even today, I think if you walk through some of the districts that you were at, Maya, they still have memorials and the marches through the neighborhoods, quiet and respectful, acknowledging that terrible day in the war. The other thing that happened during this period of time, and I don't want you to dwell on it, but as most of you know, I grew up on Okinawa, and this is the date that the Shuri line, the Shuri Castle, the Shuri Castle that burned down, they're rebuilding it now, but that formed the backbone of the Japan defense for Okinawa. It was an 82-day battle, the bloodiest battle in all of the Pacific. The most number of casualties of any battle was in Okinawa. That means Allied forces, mostly American forces, but also Japanese forces. And that 82-day battle kind of eclipsed at the time that the Shuri line fell. And the Shuri line fell, and then 15 days later, the entire battle was over. And after Okinawa, it was just, maybe 50 days before Hiroshima happened. So it was just this steady march. And I think it's useful for us. I mean, I think there are a lot of Japan hands and people who are studying Japan politics and economy and that sort of thing. You have to keep these things in mind. These are things that actually happen. This is why Japan is like it is. This is why Okinawa and that tension between Okinawa and the main island or the main central government is so tense, and also why America is so bonded with Okinawa. Okinawa, of the population, they did a census just this last week. All prefectures declined in population except for two, Tokyo and Okinawa. Everybody else suffered a decline in population. 30%, 32% of the entire Japanese nation lives in the Kanto Plain. That's just an enormous concentration. So that tells you, Ishin is not wrong to insist that they have a good step in case something happens in Tokyo. Let's make Osaka the secondary capital just in case. Because if there is any kind of even small catastrophe, everything's so concentrated in Tokyo that the whole economy could collapse or definitely suffer as a consequence of that. But anyway, these things that I'm talking about, they just illustrate the desperation that Japan had then. But also, Japan is always facing with challenges. It always is resilient. It always comes out with something better than what it had before. Sometimes it feels like it takes a little bit more time, but it's just a fabulous place. I think everybody in the audience understands that and is devoted to learning more and being more integrated into this economy, this nation, and what this nation provides to the global community. So I'm very proud. I'm very happy that you're joining me with this. I'm open to the questions. I don't know all the answers, but having a conversation, there are a lot of people that are a whole lot smarter than me that are in the audience, and they can contribute as well. So I'd like to turn this over to you, Maya, so we can get into the Q&A. But once again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us every week, 277 times. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, 277 times. And also, our audiences continue to grow. So if you find these briefings informative, please help us spread the word. Share them, share the word about them. and let your friends and colleagues know about the briefings every Sunday morning at 8:20. But the replays remain online and you can watch them even during the week and later on, of course. So, Timothy, once again, thank you for today's briefing. And I want to start with the questions and answers. I know that you addressed one of the questions that came very early this morning. That's, of course, the two questions came from Byron, and it is you talked about Osaka and Osaka becoming the second capital, but there is also another one, I think that. So the second question is, a government of Japan report noted that in 2025, exports of agricultural, forestry, and fishery products and food reached a record high of 1.7 trillion yen. This is a 12.8% increase year on year from 2024. This is driven by growing interest in Japanese cuisine. Can Japanese cuisine become ubiquitous like pizza and pasta are in daily meals around the world? Beyond the Cool Japan program, what all can be done to facilitate that?
That's a great question. I don't know about being daily cuisine for dinner plates or for lunches. You know, the reason why I think Japanese cuisine is so exquisite is because it's gone through several thousand years of development. The ramen, the noodles, the soba, and um, you know, the people who cook this stuff, they always complain it's a little bit difficult because there are a lot of ingredients. There's a process there. It's not like making pizza. It's not like spaghetti, which took off after World War II. And it's I don't know. The trade figures are kind of surprising to me because, as you'll remember, China cut off all food imports from the Fukushima area and the surrounding prefectures, and then they escalated and they cut off all of the fisheries with the complaint that Japan is releasing tainted water into the oceans, and so we're not going to have our population eat such tainted products, and that really hurt. Japan continued to sell. The United States military actually came in and purchased a lot of Japanese seafood to kind of fill that gap, and soldiers all over the world were eating Japanese, not Japanese cuisine, but Japanese food products as a consequence of that. But you know, forestry and fisheries. When you think of forestry, you can't think of anything more than the sugi trees, the enormous forests that cover all of Japan, and the cedar that those forests produce, huge. And that's what it was planted for. It was planted to build houses after World War II. The bureaucrats, the brilliant bureaucrats, thought, after we win the war, people are going to want houses, so let's plant these the mountains with these cedar trees. And wow, that's like importing rabbits to Australia, I guess. But yeah, it's an interesting take on the Japanese economy with regard to foodstuffs and lumber and forestry products. I wasn't aware of that, so thank you for the insight.
Yeah, I think that some foods have already become quite popular out of Japan as well. And I'm not talking just about sushi, right? I hear more and more
Right.
people talking about having natto, for example, which is interesting because Japan and even Japanese people are divided into two. Some of them are very much into natto eating on a daily basis, and the others are like, I just don't want it. I don't even to
Yeah.
smell it. So, but yeah, I believe these foods here in Japan that are considered good for health probably will take off sooner or later, even out of Japan. Right, and then there are some other questions. So the first one that came after Byron's questions are from Aloha Poso. Once again, he says, I wonder why price increases from companies are mentioned in the news. This never
Yeah.
happens in America. Is it some kind of Japanese law that some companies have to announce future price increases?
It's not. They do have to, in certain commodities, they are supposed to report to the Ministry of Trade and Industry that they are planning for a price increase, and they do it in a concerted, kind of organized fashion. And once they get the approval, there's some back and forth. Why are you increasing by 3 yen? Could you make it 2 yen? Because if you make it 3 yen, then it has an impact someplace else. And so they are very reluctant to raise the prices. And when they do, consumers usually get upset. So I think it's part of the acclimation process to prepare the audience, to prepare the consumers that this is going to happen and this is why. And it's been passed through the sieve of discussions with the Japanese government as well. So while you might complain, here's the logic behind it. So I think it's just part of the acclimation. There are some regulations, but it's not a blanket regulation that every time you decide to increase the price of your potato chips, you're required to report to the press and make a press release. But I think it's just it's just good politics. It's good business to involve your consumers in decisions that the company has made and explain why.
Yeah, I think that this is also a strong or a good example of how stakeholder nemawashi works, right? So companies do keep their customers and also suppliers and everybody in the loop by informing them. And in a
Yeah,
sense, when you inform them in advance, you also gain their
that's
unspoken
right.
consensus because right yes so it's something that many people see in real time. And yeah, it is true, they talk a lot about the prices these days in the morning news, the evening news, and the night news emissions as well. So thank you for bringing this question
But but
up.
but
Aloha
it's
Apostle.
not just that, Maya. It's also the coloring of the packages that went out with the
Yes.
press release. We're going to take the color out. It's also about what's going on inside corporations. Who is what's happening with the board and how much taxes they paid. And the Nissan executive, the CEO, received a huge bonus, and we just want you to know. And we know there's criticism about it because he's a foreigner and he just became the president, and now he gets this bonus and it's so much money and they're losing money. Why? So they do kind of um, I guess it's better to reveal rather than for like Bunshun to discover and then they make a scandalous piece about it. I think it's to be more forward and transparent about it. And like you said, the consumers expect that.
Yes, they do. Indeed. And okay, moving on to the next question from Aloha Apostle. He says, Secretary of War Hexet just said that Japan defense spending should be increasing to 3.5% of GDP, like Korea is doing
Yeah,
by the year 2035. But Japan is only at 1.9% at the moment. Is that realistic for Japan?
it's not 1.9. Um, but yeah, maybe cumulatively it's 1.9. So Japan agreed to raise to 2% of GDP over a 5-year period. That was compressed to 4 years. So I think it might eclipse actually 2% of GDP. But also, the GDP, the proportion of GDP has also fallen because of the yen. So that amount it's a little bit squishy. So I'll go with the 1.9 if you've due diligence that. But I think you hear the 3.5% over and over again. In 2035, that's a long way away. I think that's probably the expectation, and I I think probably Japan is going to go in that direction.
Yeah, and you still cannot help but wonder how they're going to provide the finances for that because I also, I think I read somewhere that Prime Minister Takaichi is basically now considering lowering the tax value
The
added
consumption
tax
tax,
on
yeah.
food. consumption tax, right, on foods from 8% to 1%, and that will be a huge decrease in the tax that goes into the government coffers, right? So the question is then, how are they going to provide or to make up for that decrease in tax? We'll see.
So they're
All
looking
right.
under every rock. They're looking under every rock. They're looking under every log. Where can they get, additional money? And maybe that explains a little bit of the visa issue. It could.
Hmm.
But also, the inheritance tax in Japan is so significant. It is so beyond what anybody else in G20 is doing that when you die, the state will take almost 55% of your inheritance if your estate eclipses a certain amount. So most Japanese people will die under that amount. They end up not paying any inheritance taxes. And in Japan, it's not the estate that pays the tax, it's the people who receive from whoever's deceased, whatever their estate is. And I get an automobile and I get a farm from my granddad. I pay the tax on that, and that tax needs to be paid within 10 months of the death of the person who gave you the inheritance. Um, and with the way the demographics are for Japan, this huge bubble of older people, they're now in their 80s, 90s, and 70s. And when they die, they've got tremendous built in wealth. So I think the bureaucrats are kind of waiting for that morbidly, so that the taxes can be collected. But that's a big amount too. But they've got to come up with some other. You're right. They've got to come up with some other method. We're reducing the income. How do, how do we bolster that? Because we're spending more. We're required to spend more, and more people getting older. They require more health and human services. And how do we pay for that? So it's yeah, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And that's why I think this defense industry is such an attractive market for them. This thing with drones is just explosive. The amount of energy and government money that's being devoted to that, because although it has military application now, the commercial application always follows that. That's where we got plastics. That's where we got Tang. That's where we got a lot of things that are Velcro. It came from military or space application, and Japan desperately wants to have that as a kind of an engine to develop more technology. And that's why I think it's inevitable that the defense market, to build equipment that has AI and Japanese components and its reliability, just like the Japanese cars, I think it's too attractive an option for them to ignore.
Mm. Okay, thank you for that. And before I read a question from Percival 3, I want to congratulate Andrew because he says, "Hello, Maya and Mr. Langley. My first feature film has released online worldwide. I would be honored if you watch the film."
Hey,
So, yes, congratulations on this. And if you provide some more information here in the comments, probably more people will watch it, more people in the audience. So it's not going to be just well, Mr. Langley and me. So please feel free to do that. Yes. So that, yeah, people know where to find the movie and the film. Yes. Okay. And now moving on to Percival's question. Good Sunday morning, Tim and Maya. Clear waters and clouds today. Is the Bank of Japan going to do another intervention to control the USD Japan yen rate to 160? And how much assets and how many years can that continue? So, and how many assets does Japan have? You touched upon this, I know.
we have Japan has lots and lots and lots of assets. It has lots of assets. It just doesn't want to relinquish them. Um,
Mm,
and yes, I think another intervention, the way the yen, if you look at a graph, if you type in yen dollar into the Google search, it tells you what today's rate is, and it also gives you a chart of what happened over the last 15 days. And the chart is just it's inching up. It's like a force of water coming. So you can kind of predict what the trajectory is going to be by looking at that process or that progress. And I think it looks inevitable to breach 160. And what are you going to do? And how many times are you going to go to the well? And how deep is the well? I mean, those are huge questions. And coming up with that amount of money, 11.7 trillion yen, how often can you do that? And that gave them breathing room for 4 weeks. So yeah, it's a great observation, a great question. I don't know what the answer is.
Indeed, at this point of time, and I believe that the government is looking for an answer as well at this point. Peter Pan says, I appreciate the government efforts to keep the value of the yen below 160. But what about the price of rice? About 9 months ago, I still could get it at about 2,138 yen per kilogram per 5 kilos in
Yeah.
Rakuten and TOP. But that's not the case anymore. So, does anybody discuss the price of rice, or are
Yes.
there any debates about it?
Yes. So there was a news report just this last week. Um, I don't know if it was NHK, but I do remember seeing it. So the first harvest is being produced in Okinawa. It's awful early, but their season is a little bit. There are two rice harvests that you can get in one growing season, um, and they were talking about the price of rice being lower, projecting for this next season, and they were already pricing the rice that is being produced in Okinawa, the first yield. So I think with so much effort that was put on it, you remember Koizumi as minister. What was he minister of? But he was talking about the price of rice. He was front and center on that. He is currently the defense minister. So it was before he became defense minister. He was talking about the price of rice and how he was going to reduce that. And then they went to the stockpiles, and then they went to the older rice to keep the price down. But the LDP suffered a huge backlash as a consequence of that. I don't think we're going to have that this year. But once again, like you said, Maya, it might just be going into the well to subsidize further to keep the prices below a certain threshold so the Japanese population doesn't get too upset. The gasoline prices are subsidized as well. And where does this money come from? So the supplemental budget, it's not directly related to the rice issue, but it is related to the gasoline issue, is going to be finalized and debated this week. And I think the bill will be put up for a vote maybe on Thursday. So this time next week, I will report on that because it is a big issue, this supplemental budget, and where does the money come from, and where is it going to be devoted to? I'll be able to more succinctly report on that.
All right, thank you for that. And also, we've got two independent questions, one on LinkedIn and one on YouTube, coming from two different people, and they are about the demographic challenges Japan is going through. So we've got Percival again and also Akira Tokuhiro talking about it. So the questions are, what is your opinion, Timothy, on how to solve Japan decline of population, decline of births, low marriage rates, lack of workforce, and importing immigration? How can that be solved? Is it an unsolvable issue? And then a very similar question. The national population decline was in the press recently. So, what are some short and long term solutions that the Prime Minister can implement?
Well, this is an issue that we've been struggling with for a long time. I don't personally have solutions. We know what the options are. Some of them are less distasteful than others, but obviously, have more children. Well, having more children doesn't help us until 20 years from now. Then it starts to help. So having more children now. But Tokyo is paying for people to have babies and providing them lots of subsidies, lots of payments to have children, for artificial insemination, for all sorts of things to have more babies. Tokyo To. Not everybody does. Not Tokyo sets kind of the standard, but not everybody meets it. Yokohama doesn't do as well. Osaka, Nagoya, they're not as generous. Their populations are declining too. Tokyo's seems to be growing, but it's growing by infusion. That's people from outside of Tokyo coming into the Kanto Plains. It's not because of births, but the births are increasing here. So I think the real solution is, make the economy, make the future bright and uplifting, so that people, number one, want to raise a family, and a family that's more than, one child, two children, or three children. And then the second one is to make the economy so attractive that qualified foreigners want to come here, establish a business, be hired by Japanese companies. Um, most Europeans who are at the same level, they finish college, they enter a job market in their own countries, they receive a far higher salary than the Japanese do when they finish college and they enter companies and enter the economy. But similarly, the cost of living is a little bit lower here as well. So the foreigners who come here on expatriate packages, or they're sent by their company, they're living in heaven, because they're supposed to be paid what they would have gotten in their home country in Japan. And plus they have other benefits as well, housing and schooling allowances. But that's a minuscule part of solving the problem. What Japan needs is a more robust economy. And I think not being able to do that, then that means AI, that means automation. Even the SDF, the self-defense forces, they have not met their recruitment target for 20 years. And this year also they're 10% short, more than 10% short of their recruitment targets. And given the defense posture of the country, it needs to do something. And I think what they're going to do is they're going to rely on AI, they're going to rely on automation, they're going to rely on drones, that sort of thing. But still, GDP is tied to the number of people in the population. Japan is first. It's not the worst, but it's the first. South Korea, there are other countries. Italy is going through the same demographic change. And everybody's watching Tokyo. How do they do it? What are they going to do? How do they prepare? And so I think there's a great opportunity for Japan to pony up and to do something really remarkable. It's just that it rarely does in time. It usually watches and picks the best of other people's examples and then hones on that. But I don't think the timing is right for that. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it's a huge crux for the government, for taxpayers, for providing services to the population.
Yes, yes, I can tell you that. Well, 2 months ago, we had a podcast episode with the former Minister of Healthcare. His name is Keizo Takemi, Mr. Keizo Takemi, and he talks about these problems. Timothy, may I ask you to turn off your mic?
Okay. Yeah, I'm hearing an echo too.
Yes. All right. Okay, thank you for that. And so he talks about the 4 pillars of the policy of the government, and they're going to basically follow those pillars, and they have been creating policies to support them. You can watch the episode on Japan Expert Insights on YouTube. You can also go to Japan Expert Insights on LinkedIn and scroll down and find it. So it gives really a good information, good piece, let's say, overview of what Japan has been doing currently and will continue doing, so that they can address the issue of demographic changes. And also, there is one more thing. Yesterday, I was talking with somebody about these challenges, and I was thinking, Japan currently has about 125 million, maybe 23 million people, right? 123 million people population. But when you come to think about history, because you also, Timothy, you walk us through some recent historical events, Japan, until the beginning of the Second World War, or around that time, Japan had just about 72 million people. So, and a country which is so devoid of natural resources, maybe having a population of 123 million people is not really that a good thing, such a good thing. So maybe finding a balance between what the country, the land can sustain and can offer, and the number of people is not a bad idea at all. And of course, many people would say, yeah, bigger population, bigger military power. I agree with with that, but can you really sustain that? Is the question. And again, there will be short-term pains, fewer gains, of course, but I believe that we need to look at this issue from different angles and try to find a balanced solution. Sorry for that,
So,
Timothy. Thank you for, yeah.
no, I apologize about the mic. I can, when the mic is on, I can also hear the reverb. So let me say something about Takemi Sensei. So that was a great interview you had with him. He is so great. His English is so good. His dad was also a very famous, actually far more famous than he was, or he is. He's not in the diet anymore, but his father had his diet office next to my office, Nakayama Taro's office. And also in the same political faction in the Fukuda-ha, which eventually became the Abe-ha.
Right.
So we knew each other, and the secretaries were very friendly to each other. And I have known Takemi Sensei even as a diet secretary to his dad way back then, maybe 30, 40 years ago. That's amazing. But what an incredible interview you had with him. Thank you for that.
Yes, and also the interview is good to watch because many people just assume that nothing is being done. When you look at Japan from outside, especially, and of course, if you're here and you're not into politics, it's easy to assume, to make that assumption that the politicians are not doing anything to solve the problem, but things are happening. They're not just being in the news. And that's why I do recommend you to watch the interview. I may reshare it maybe on LinkedIn during the coming week. So, Timothy, thank you for this. And then another question is, yes?
Yeah, while you're talking about being in the news, I forgot to mention, remember Bunshun had a hit piece on Miss Takaichi. It was, the hit piece came just after they decided to form this rah-rah group under Mr. Aso called Kokuryoku to support the prime minister. So that was created. The hit piece in Bunshun came out, and then they had their inaugural meeting that was attended by the U.S. ambassador, right? The next week, Bunshun also came out with a hit piece. That was last week. And Bunshun doing that twice in a row, it looks like there's a strategy there to cause damage and pain. And Bunshun is known as a prime minister killer. They can actually collapse a government. A lot of anticipation and trepidation was this week. Will they come with a third hit piece in Bunshun this week? And they had a piece. It wasn't as hard hitting, but it wasn't the top scoop. It wasn't in the first lineup. So it looks like maybe that passion has died down a little bit, and maybe giving the prime minister a little bit of a boost. But I think what I'm trying to convey here is that the press has a really controlling weight on what the population thinks and how it reaches its decisions and how it evaluates what people are doing. So Bunshun projects a lot of that, but just the Nikkei, the regular newspapers, and NHK News also does. But SNS is really coming to the fore these days. And the criticism of the prime minister was that she used SNS, social media, to criticize and bring down her competitors for prime minister. There were 6 of them. There were how many of them? 6 of them? 9 of them? I forget. It was so long ago, less than a year. But she used this SNS program to kind of elevate herself by criticizing her opponents, who are, some of them are ministers of state right now. Some of them are sitting it out, waiting for a next opportunity. But yeah, all of this stuff is important. And not everybody who is living in Japan or even an expert on watching these things has access to all of these sources of information. So it's really an interesting dynamic.
Right. Thank you for that. Okay, and then moving on, we've got Hiroko-san. She's writing, Defense Minister Koizumi stated that Japan will explicitly include the use of artificial intelligence by the self-defense forces in the upcoming national security documents. What does this signify?
That's huge. So first of all, it signifies that Japan needs to develop a homegrown library, a large, what do they call it, Maya? The large language model?
Language models, yes, data that basically can support the development of the large language models
That's
here,
right.
oh, well, on Japanese soil.
So Japan is not at the forefront of that technology. And also the previous big discussion was data centers, have big data centers and have the energy to run those data centers. And those are eclipsed by AI centers. So AI consumes far more energy. It's far more complicated. The chips to run it are more expensive. They're more exotic. So there are fewer of them. But for Japan to embed Japan homegrown AI into these products is a dream and a goal. But I think reaching it is because they don't have the wartime experience. They're not, they're getting it from Ukraine, from what's going on in Iraq, from different countries that are actually involved in conflict. But Japan doesn't personally um, produce these wartime drones, and thus it doesn't have the experience and the technologies for evading, detection or evading, the drone destroyer vehicles, that sort of thing. So it's interesting that it's actually, if you're going to buy a component from Japan that has AI, it better be pretty good. So I don't know how they're going to be able to develop that language model, but that is the goal, and they're putting a lot of money into it.
Yeah, I think that just recently it was basically in the news here in Japan that that's Yomiuri, yes, that 15 Japanese companies, including Toshiba, Hitachi, KDDI, Fanuc, Yasukawa, Daikin, JERA, GERA, Asahi Kasei, Nippon Life, and so on, they have well announced that they will join Japan's National AI Foundation Model Project, right? So this is the private businesses coming together so that they can probably work on developing, probably collecting the data as well. And then it says that it brings a total of almost 25 of Japan's largest companies, right? And names here. And also SoftBank and NEC, Sony, Honda are there as well. I also read that basically the Japanese, that's probably OpenAI, they have said that they would provide information for Japanese infrastructure, not only, the data itself, but they will invest into developing Japanese infrastructure. So I think that everything is coming together. I mean, when you look at the larger picture, right? So eventually the self-defense forces are preparing for implementing it, and also the Japanese companies and manufacturers and also IT service companies are preparing for that. So there is really an advance in this area. Once again, if you look at the bigger picture, then you'll see that how things are, all the lines eventually are moving towards convergence. Okay, and then we're yes, Timothy, I cannot hear you. You're on mute, maybe.
Unlike
Okay,
cars, you
unlike
can buy
cars.
the second best model or the third best model. You're going to buy it for your daughter, or for your wife, or it doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles. But for defense equipment, you don't want to be number two. You have to be number
Right.
one if you're going to be selling defense equipment. And I think this is a long reach for Japan to have the AI capabilities. Embedding it is a different issue. I think they'll probably do really well on that, but the AI capabilities, that's the big race that's going on now. Is the United States going to win the AI race? Is China going to win the AI race? Is Japan going to purchase license agreements for that AI? Are they going to embed that? It's a very complicated web. I don't think Japan by itself solely is going to be successful in creating an AI large language model for that kind of technology. I think it just needs to be broader, and maybe the United States
Yeah.
says, look, you build these products and we'll build these, and you form a kind of a global dominance on these products, because Japan needs to have another automobile industry to rescue the economy.
Right, and also I believe that it's not going to be just the LLM, the investment in those large language models. It's going to be also in what do they call that? The other type of AI, which works mostly analyzes data and so on. So forgive me for not being a specialist in AI, but yes, yeah. So it's not just the LLM, right? It's I believe it's more than that companies are going to invest and develop here. So we'll see. We'll continue to watch, observe, and report. Also, since we're talking about defense and security, we've got Agnieszka, Kapavnik. Thank you so very much, Agnieszka. She says, if the US, UK, and Australia reaffirm security cooperation, do you think that Quad might again rise in influence? Timothy.
Yes, I've been following that pretty carefully too. I think yes, Quad is the way to go. India kind of needs Quad, but I think the rest of the Quad needs India as well. The problem is that India is pretty close to Russia and pretty friendly with Russia, but just India has just a huge population, and they're starting to come up the development curve, and so they need the technology, they need the jobs, they need the manufacturing and the industry. Japan needs that as well. They're not going to generate it in-house, so going to Vietnam, going to India is a great alternative. That's what they did with electronics. They lost the entire electronics market because they offshored it. But I think between a rock and a hard place, they've got to decide on what things they can do and excel at, and sublease or subcontract those that they're not that good at. And I think that is the design of Quad, to build these economies together. And it's just, I mean, working with India, Japan and India, it's just really fraught with difficulties. It never has really been able to gel very well, even though there's a lot of mutual acknowledgement that it would be great, we could really benefit from it, but it's just really a slow go.
Indeed, yes. All right, and another question here coming from maybe a sensei this time. They say, is there any help for long-term foreigners approaching retirement with even just a few assets in their home country, which might be eaten by tax here? I cannot hear you. I got you this time.
Who's the question from?
Maybe a sensei. That's a handle name on
Okay.
YouTube.
So if you die in Japan and you are susceptible to Japanese inheritance tax, yes, they can grab assets that are even outside of Japan. They're definitely going to be able to grab a portion of the assets that are in Japan, particularly real estate, but also, your bank accounts, your jewelry, your art collection, that sort of thing, and also your foreign assets. And that's why this inheritance tax law that I've been talking about for a couple of months is so onerous, because it really disproportionately hits the foreigners, because the foreigners have lots of overseas assets. Proportionately, most Japanese don't. And most Japanese will die without eclipsing the limit above which Japanese taxes kick in. But when they start kicking in, it can be very heavy, and it could mean that the people who inherit from you have to sell the asset in order to pay the tax. So that's happened in many instances. So it's something you need to become a little bit familiar with. If you read some of the articles that I've produced, they're on my webpage. It might give you a little bit more insight into what's going on there.
Yes, indeed. And the website is langleyesquire.com. You can go there and click on Insights, on the menu, and of course you be taken immediately to the blog. So there are a lot of insights there, a lot of also information. You can follow the synopsis there as well. And there is one question from Percival. And Percival, I apologize. I think that I have difficulty understanding your question very well, but I'll read it out anyway. So Pope Leon his latest speech on AI is calling on AI that AI should be disarmed and humanity should keep control. So what do you think? Maybe we'll not see that in our time, but probably this will happen for our grandkids. Kids.
I'm not sure. It's kind of out of my area of expertise, but from time to time I do follow a chat that talks to Claude and talks to the AI model. Please tell us what the Vatican has in storage. What does it hold in its vaults? What kind of secrets is it protecting? And Claude comes out with some really interesting insights, so you can understand why this tension between the Pope and the Vatican and this new technology that's coming out is so potentially disruptive. I'm not up on that subject, but I have been following it with keen interest. And the fact that the Pope even takes time to comment on it just tells you how big AI is. It's only in its infancy now. It's been out for what, less than 2 years, right? And it's beginning to embed itself into the economy, into schools, into businesses. But it's just getting started, and it's growing exponentially. It's not growing arithmetically. It's growing exponentially. So the impact it's going to have within the next 2 years is just, we can't even envision it right now. So I think it is good cause for concern. And coming from the Pope, I think it's a valuable authority to discuss that. But I'm not that up on it. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and Timothy, thank you for answering it. With this, I would like to say that if there are any further questions coming today or later during the week, we'll address them next Sunday, starting at 8:20, when Timothy will be here once again, hopefully, of course. Yes. And to everybody who stayed with us, who watched or will watch later, thank you so very much. Help us spread the word of these briefings. We'll be very, very grateful. We still are, even now. So have a great Sunday. Enjoy the week. And also, we hope that you'll be here with your friends and colleagues next Sunday again. And Timothy is ready to dance. Maybe. Okay, yes. Right. Okay. See you next week. Thanks a lot and enjoy the day.